It's another episode of Getting to Know Seahawks Twitter, and this time I am joined by two guests, not just one, but two, and they come from across the pond, as we say all the time, and it's sort of turned into a cliche. We have Stuart Court, we have Adam Nathan from the one, only, and official podcast of the UK Seahawkers, the Pedestrian Podcast. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Rather warm, to be honest, but yeah, not too bad. It's
like 100 degrees in your, 90 to 100 in your kind of metric. But
wow.
I mean, my overriding emotion is staggered and stunned that someone wants to interview us, as opposed to the other way around, where we're scrambling around looking for people to talk to. So, you know, I'm already feeling a little bit flustered just at that.
Well, we can bond a little bit over the weather, because it wasn't too long ago that we had weather in like north of 100 degrees, degrees Fahrenheit. So what would that be in Celsius? I honestly wouldn't know like what's definitively hot, because you guys are like 27 and like 33, and we're like, wait a second, that's below freezing for us.
I think it's probably about
36.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. But I mean, I think what we can definitively say is that no one's going to question if we're faking being British, because we started off by talking straight about the weather. So clearly we unequivocally must be British if that's the way that we've gone to from question one. Well,
honestly, I would say that that's something that we Americans have in common with you guys, is that that's generally the go-to for small talk, is to talk about the weather somehow, especially if you're trapped in an elevator with somebody else. Oh, how's the weather going? Oh, yeah, it's great. All right, okay, bye. The weather's been great for one Russell Wilson, and I feel like we should just start by talking about this before we get into training camp and all the things that we're wondering about before the Seahawks start the season. Russell Wilson's Instagram got Adam and I in a little bit of trouble with some of the more serious Seahawks fans. I don't know what your reaction was to that, Stu, but I'm not going to lie. I had a good time roasting Russ for what I find to be an over-the-top Instagram, but to make sure that all those people who are Russ supporters love me still, I'm pandering with my Let Russ Cook shirt. I want him to cook on the field. I would just like the sizzling off the field to chill a little bit. Just one Instagram post a day. It's fine. We get it. You like Venice. You like Italy. We don't need it rubbed in our face every 5 seconds.
Yeah, my biggest thing is like how he's like selective with what he posts. Like, he's on holiday, everyone posts holiday pictures, but I think I said on our pod this week that Detlef Schrempf posted like 10 days before he went on his jaunt round Italy about how he was at a function for Seattle Children's and Russell Wilson was doing this and that. And it was nowhere to be seen on Wilson's Instagram or social media. And I'm like, if he mixed in some of that, like the clearly good he is doing, I know it's like picking hairs and kind of thing, but I think it would be like a little bit more like palatable is maybe a bit strong, but it wouldn't be as like jarring when he's just staged a photo and it's all lit and he's walking across an empty square because there's still a worldwide pandemic going on.
That one was my favorite. The one where he's slowly walking towards something. We're like, hey, well, walk a little faster, Russ. I'm with you doing that. We all know he does some really good things. And It is interesting. I mean, maybe he doesn't want to come off as humble braggy by posting all the things that he's doing in the community, because he is clearly doing some good stuff. But it is funny. I mean, man, he and Ciara are having the time of their lives, Adam.
I mean, look, this is Getting to Know as a series, right? So If you want to get to know us, I think I was in thinking about what we were going to talk about. I was trying to rationalize in my head that I think one of the biggest differences between American fandom in sport and British is that whoever I support or whatever I support, I am addicted and obsessed with the team. I pretty much despise every player that's ever pulled the shirt on at all times. Like, the way in which we support teams is that we slag our own players off. Like, we love them as players, but if a Premier League star was carrying on like Wilson was in Italy or wherever, the roasting would be off the charts. I don't even think you could quantify it on like English soccer Twitter. So for me, it's just a natural reaction to be like, what on earth is he doing? It doesn't mean that I dislike him as a player or like I'm anti. I just think that's like the English way. And I mean, I think I tweeted something like, who is being paid to just follow them around and take these ridiculous pictures? And I got flamed by Russell Hive. But for me, it just felt like a totally natural question to ask, because if it was Harry Kane, for example, who's a big soccer star over here who plays for the team that I support, everyone would be like, what on earth is he doing? So I think, that was quite an interesting dynamic that you could tell between like American fans and English fans.
I think though too, most Americans, we ball bust each other. And if any of our friends had gone about social media like that, we would be giving a merciless crap for it, which is not to say that we dislike the person. It's just, this was, I mean, as you described so astutely, Adam, one of the pictures looked like they're in the Matrix. Inside with sunglasses on. It's Morpheus. Oh no. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, whatever it was. It was very amusing.
Yeah. And I mean, when you retweeted that picture, I think the day after I'd been murdered by Wilson Hive, I thought, well, I am going to do Paul for attempted manslaughter if I get done again here, because this would be entirely his fault for publicizing it. Because I think Joe Fan and Mike Dugar and some of the KJR guys jumped on my previous tweet from the day before. And so I got nailed by them. And I thought, okay, so now it's Paul's turn to get everyone on my back. But thankfully, I think we must have done it at a time when there was a baseball game or something going on. So we managed to hide it a little bit under some other stuff going on that was clearly more important than Russell Morpheus.
I think some of the good thing is I still have some of those Houston followers. So some of them are actually like, oh yeah, this is ridiculous. But also those Houston people are like dead inside because of what's going on with Deshaun Watson and that god awful team these days. Guys, can you believe training camp is a week away? I mean, I'm very thrilled about this. And I'm also very curious to see what's going to be different, because obviously the big problem at the end of last year was the offense. It just hit a wall. Now Shane Waldron's in, and this is where Shane Waldron and this offense are going to get the most work in determining how they can be better as a team this year, so that maybe, and we've seen the great starts from them on offense the last couple of seasons, but maybe this is the year where they're actually able to make it happen for the entirety of the 17-game slate now, which is never going to feel right when we say it.
Nope. It's a travesty. Like, I keep getting messages from my friends going like 15-2. I'm like, how many losses? Sorry, did they lose in the playoffs? But, I'm not. I think me and Adam spoke on like our WhatsApp and everything. That I kind of can't like looking forward to seeing it, because obviously we heard so much about Shane Waldron and what he's doing and what he's bringing. In the classroom, I guess there's obviously still not the full shebang on the field, but we're going to be learning and seeing a bit more than we did with what 3/4 of the roster out there a couple of months ago. So it's just I'm fully buying the hype on Shane Waldron, just because the diversity and the language that they're using to describe how intricate and deep, and
I love all these words.
Yeah, so so I'm fully in. I kind of waiting for the fall to be made to look like a fool, which is my usual.
There's the pessimism.
Yeah.
Are you guys still hurting? I'd imagine from the national boys and the penalty kicks, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually at the game.
You were there?
Yeah, because I'm that idiot. I mean, it's always penalties. Unfortunately, the game was kind of lost at the full-time whistle because everyone looked around us and just thought, well, this is just like a procession that we go through. You play football, you watch it, and you lose on penalties. Kind of, you wake up, you eat, and you go to sleep. It's kind of as formulaic as that, unfortunately. But I do have to say that, after that, the looming of training camp has proved a fairly nice distraction. It's got Stu and I off of our podcasting backsides, I would say, after having a little bit of a break over the summer where we just couldn't get any more juice out of the orange. So we're back spinning today, and it's nice to talk about football, your football again.
Yeah. And I think what's also nice, and who knows if we'll be doing this next off season, but it does feel like everyone's back on the same page together, and how long that lasts, who knows? But Stu, as you said, and Adam, I'm curious as to how you feel about it. It really is feeling like, if we're talking about any newcomer for the Seahawks this year, it is Shane Waldron that is at the very top of the list. And while there's some other guys, I'm curious about what Gabe Jackson's going to do for the offensive line, Gerald Everett, Kerry Hyder on defense, Akilla Witherspoon, among many others. Waldron, it's weird. I've never, I guess, looked at a coordinator as having the potential to have such an impact as I am with Shane Waldron, whether good or bad.
I mean, I guess in a way, it's a shame that the let Russ cook stuff happened last year, when if it could have happened this year with the new hotshot young offensive coordinator, it almost felt like we did half the plan last year and maybe we got half the plan this year. And so I'm quite interested to see how that manifests itself, as whether we get a coherent thing. You are hearing all of the super tropes, like, getting men in space, getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands. I mean, if you were playing like NFL bingo, I feel like OTAs for the Seahawks pretty much got you full house on every day, right? But the Seahawks have always talked a good game with that. That's one of Pete Carroll's mantras. So I think as much as I'm looking forward to training camp, it's going to be nice to see it in an actual game, to see whether the talk has actually manifested itself into something that we can look at and watch and enjoy.
After Shane Waldron, of all the guys who are jumping in, and this is something I'm sort of putting together for our website, who do you think is number two as far as expectations that we have, and maybe a totally different answer as far as who's actually going to give the biggest return? Because obviously you've also got the draft picks too, but they've made some moves in free agency. The Gabe Jackson trade, probably the most aggressive thing that they did. If you had to pick your number one for expectations and what they'll actually bring to the table, who would you go with number one, Stu? Putting you on the spot.
Ray Brown, I think.
Trey Brown?
Yeah, because there's when Shaquille Griffin came into the league, obviously he had the best cornerback of the generation on the other side, so he kind of got a more comfortable introduction into the league. But Trey Brown pretty much is going to be in the rotation at some point in the season, no matter if they go 3, whatever. So I think him proving his mettle, proving his worth ASAP would, one, obviously prove that the pick was right in the 4th or 5th round, whenever he was, but also it would solve arguably the biggest question mark on that defensive side of the ball. So obviously Shaq's gone, DJ Reed is still back, Akello is feast or famine, it seems, so far during his career. So yeah, if Trey Brown can find a niche into a role and make an impact on the outside or at any point in the early part of camp or preseason, then obviously the season, I think that would be with long-term baseball club control kind of thing for the Seahawks. That would be the biggest benefit on if he hits the ground running for me.
One of the interesting things about Brown, John Schneider did say after the draft, and of course everyone's going to talk up their guys, but he said if he was taller, that this is maybe a top 10 pick that we're talking about at corner. And if you watch him on film, what excites me most about him is that he made 3 clinching plays and 3 back-to-back Big 12 championship games. So considering he's a 4th round pick, I would say that I have some higher expectations for him because of what he's been able to do. Adam, how about you?
So I think the talk about Darrell Taylor coming out of OTAs and so in the UK, that would be described as he's like a new signing. When you have a player that's injured for ages and they come back, that's like a new signing in English parlance. But I think probably what sums up mine and Stu's relationship quite well is that he knows what he's talking about, and Trey Brown is absolutely the correct answer. I kind of just float along and pretend and just pick up a few narrative things. So for me, the Dwayne Eskridge pick in the 2nd round, when he's your highest draft pick and you have 3 picks, and it very much seems that that's the Shane Waldron kind of guy. I'm not necessarily expecting 1,000 yards or whatever, but I feel like there's a symbolic result that we need to see from that pick, because it does very much seem like that's a new regime pick. And it surprises me that someone that was picked ahead in terms of pick numbers of DK Metcalf, the best receiver maybe in the league when we talk in 12 months time, getting $25 million a year contract. It surprised me how little chatter there's been expectation wise, because that was a pretty serious investment given what you already had on the roster. I mean, from a value perspective, based on how many draft picks you had, players you had on the roster, I don't feel like it was that much more of a usage than Rashad Penny was. I know that was a first round versus second, but that was a first round in a full draft, and you didn't necessarily have a go-to guy, whereas this is your third choice receiver with such a high pick. It seemed like based on what you had, like what your treasure chest had to spend, that was a lot. And so I'm interested to see how that works. And I think there should be pressure on the pick, if not the player, to perform, if that makes sense.
It does. With Eskridge, what I thought was the best, it did feel, because the Rams drafted a very similar player the very next pick, Tutu Atwell, if I'm not mistaken. And Eskridge is something that I imagine Shane Waldron looked at, maybe thought that the Rams could use him in a way in that offense that he was a part of. And I'm hoping, because he does have, if I'm not mistaken, it's a running back background and from high school. And he's got a little bit of speed vertically too. I'm curious into all the ways that they could theoretically use him. Now, he is a second round pick, and wide receivers, it's always dicey what you're going to get out of them year one. I maybe should have less expectations for Dwayne Eskridge, just given what we got out of DK Metcalf, being in the back of the second round and how awesome he was from the get-go, and now looking like he's a top 10 wide receiver, maybe even a top 5 wide receiver. But yeah, I think Eskridge is a good answer too. Adam, you mentioned one a moment ago, and this would be the one that I will put on it, because just like we have heard with Trey Brown, some of these really positive things said about him, I think they really believe in Darrell Taylor. And if you go back to last year's draft, they kept talking about what kind of a player he was. They thought about taking him in the first round, but instead they took Jordan Brooks because they weren't sure Jordan Brooks was going to be there. Taylor was still there, and they could not stop saying enough complimentary things about him. And I got to go back and find some of those quotes. But then he has that shin injury, and that shin injury, it really just destroyed his rookie season. And I remember getting in arguments with people on Seahawks Reddit who were like, oh, well, Darrell Taylor's going to be back at some point. I was like, well, he hasn't even practiced. We're not even sure if he can practice at this point. But you're hearing some of the same things again, and it looks like he's going to be already penned in, not just penciled in, penned in as your strong side linebacker, which is really saying something given that KJ Wright was awesome at that spot last year. So if I had to make a pick, I guess it's Darrell Taylor. I don't know if the expectations that they have for him are actually going to be merited, but they clearly are buying big time stock into him, to the point where, I mean, they might even not bring KJ Wright back at all just so that they can get Taylor on the field this year.
Yeah, I think the reason I think I would probably go Brown over Taylor is, like, if Taylor doesn't work, Jamal Adams can pick up the slack. Or like Marquise Blair if he's healthy and playing nickel. But if Trey Brown doesn't work, then I don't even know who's after Brown, Weatherspoon, and DJ Reeves. So
I mean, they brought him here this year, but like that guy hasn't been good in a while. There's some who knows?
Yeah. So like he won Man of the Year on the Jets after they cut him.
Yeah,
so it's like
not a good sign. It's weird. No, when I was in Houston, everyone thought Pierre Desir was good. He had a couple of good games against DeAndre Hopkins, and then he just stopped being good. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, but I think that's why I'll go Brown, because I think there's no other, well, there is options, but there's a cliff after Trey Brown, where after Darrell Taylor, like I said, there's Jamal, or there's RJ Collier, maybe Kerry Hyder, Poona Ford, Rasheem Green, Alton Robinson. There's options if Taylor either gets the injury bug again or isn't what he thought he was, or they thought he was.
One of my best friends is also called Darrell Taylor. And so it's just hard to envisage like another 33-year-old white English Jew doing much on an NFL roster. But, so it's just a hard mindset for me to get into, really.
Oh, that's totally fair. So from an expectations standpoint, we talked about the Seahawks. The rest of the division is really good. let's go through the rest of the division before we go into training camp. If you can power rank them 1 through 4 and put the Seahawks in here somewhere, we'll start with you again, Stu. 1 through 4. What is the NFC West power rankings going into the year? Obviously, some transformations in San Francisco where they're not all dead this year, which is key. You don't want to have a bunch of injured players. And the Rams brought in Matt Stafford. And the Cardinals, they signed a bunch of older guys like J.J. Watt and A.J. Green and Malcolm Butler.
The Rams have the best player in the world on their team, so they're probably going to be. I mean, yeah, I think the Rams are 1. I really like. I was a part of the Trey Lance Hive when he was in North Dakota State.
Trey Hive, I like it.
So yeah, if Shanahan keeps it with Garoppolo, the Seahawks are probably 2, and Niners are 3, and then Cardinals are 4. Although, yeah. I think the Rams are the best. The reason the Rams didn't win the division last year is because of the quarterback, and they've upgraded exponentially large over like a 2018 Mariners relief pitcher, I guess. And now they've got and now they've got 2018 Edwin Diaz back there, 2019 Edwin Diaz. So. Okay. But yeah, no, I think the Rams are the team to be shooting for, like Denzel in training day.
Big news for them today. Cam Akers tore his Achilles at just training, so they're down their number 1 running back, and we'll see how that affects them. That is a roster that definitely top heavy. You mentioned Stu, the best player in the world. That's probably Aaron Donald. I'd agree with you there. Jalen Ramsey's a great cornerback and has had a lot of success. I do wonder about Stafford. I don't know. Maybe it's an anti-Detroit bias or something. How do you feel about the grand scheme of the NFC West, Adam?
I think the top to bottom win total will be 12 and then 9. So I think 12 and 5 and 9 and 8 will be the difference, because I think the division is that strong.
It is.
The only reason I disagree with Stu, I think the reason that I think injuries were the only reason that San Francisco didn't win the division last year. I mean, they were absolutely ravaged in a number of positions. And so I think they probably have the best head coach overall. I know that there's people like to have the jury out on Shanahan, but I just see too much good there to not think. But maybe I'll be completely wrong. So I would probably go San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, Arizona. But I think if it wouldn't stone if it was 12, 11, 10, 9 as the win totals in that order.
I think all 4 NFC West teams make the playoffs.
Wow. 7 in the 4 out of 7.
Yeah.
That would be something else.
It's probably only New Orleans that are going to have a say in that, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, NFC East, not a good division. NFC South, you got the Bucks. Are the Saints going to be the same team where we don't even know what their quarterback is? NFC North, assuming Aaron Rodgers is back, is there anyone really other than the Packers that's going to vie? I guess Minnesota sort of has a chance. I don't think anyone's taking Chicago seriously until they move on from Matt Nagy. Yeah, that's actually, I think, quite possible. So I like that take.
I think the most interesting thing this year is that Russell Wilson has always basically played in a stacked NFC versus the AFC. And I think maybe for the first year in a while, it shifted to a point where you don't need to close one eye and squint the other that much in order to see a fairly decent path for Seattle to at least the championship game. Father Time will eventually catch up with Tom Brady. Father Time is undefeated, even against Tom Brady. And one day, even if he's 54 as opposed to 45, it will have to happen. Aaron Rodgers, God knows what he's going to do. So if a couple of things break their way and, I don't see as hard a path. Like this time last year, I would have said there's no chance for Seattle. I don't think they've got enough quality versus the other teams in the NFC. I think this year you don't need to kind of play too much mental gymnastics in your head to be fairly confident that they can do it. And I don't even think that this is the best Seahawks roster in the last 5 or 6 years. I just think that's the way the league has split itself up with some of the trades that have gone down, shifting players towards the AFC. And thankfully, you only play one of those in the playoffs. So it's a crapshoot, I guess.
It's an interesting division in that too. we're all kind of looking at the Cardinals, I think, as the special team that's got to go do things perhaps in a remedial class, where the Seahawks, they have the 49ers number, at least they did last year. The 49ers have the Rams number and the Rams have the Seahawks number. It's like a perfect game of rock, paper, scissors that you have between the three of them. And yeah, I mean, whoever puts themselves probably in the best position out of those three gives himself at least one home game, if not multiple. Yeah, you could definitely see one of those teams making a serious push. I'm with you, Adam, and I look at San Francisco, and I think if they were healthier last year, they would have been better, even with Jimmy Garoppolo under center. And I think Garoppolo gets a lot of crap. I used to be a bit of a Jimmy G truther back in the day before the 49ers put him on full display for a long period of time. I think he's on that Kirk Cousins level. Can you win with a Kirk Cousins quarterback? Only if you have a really good roster the rest of the way. And defensively, if they are healthy, I mean, you have Nick Bosa, who is really, really good. The hope is that all of those other guys around him, Eric Armstead, D Ford, actually do anything. But, you know, in the middle of that defense, with Fred Warner, I really like them. And then offensively, I think they have some really talented skill players. It's really a matter of, is Jimmy Garoppolo going to actually be competent? Are they going to pull the plug on him and bring in Trey Lance, which I would imagine would involve some sort of growing pains? And even if maybe they bring him in and he's awesome. I will say, like, just having watched the guy, I can see why, Stu, you're on the Trey hive. That guy he can do just about everything. He's just very raw. He's just very, very raw at this point in time.
Mm. Yeah, he is. His 2019 season was was it 48 and no interceptions or something? Obviously, it's North Dakota State. He's not playing at Alabama's Ohio State, but the teams he was playing, he was torching up. But yeah, there is. Yeah, and when he played last year, one game he played last year, he wasn't as good. But obviously, one game in like a bit of a bit of a cat on its own is kind of a tough read. But yeah, no, I don't. I think the reason the Cardinals are, well, on this conversation, universally fourth is because Cliff Kingsbury I just don't see it. Like JJ Watt might still have some. AJ Green, I think he's been injured since the last 4 or 5 years.
Feels like for a while.
Yeah, and they've got Nuck Hopkins, and the quarterback is one of the more fun players to watch if you can ever watch a Cardinals game as a neutral, as a Seahawks fan, but he is really fun to watch. But yeah, the head coach isn't it. So that's the biggest detraction for them, I think, because a lot of the other pieces are there. Also, they're there in the division where the other three teams have got all their pieces and places, hopefully, in some semblance of order.
The head coach is handsome, but yeah, he doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. No. Stu, you seem to think Matt Stafford's a lot better. How do you feel, Adam, about Matt Stafford? I'm in this. I feel like everyone's trying to make him happen, and while I respect his toughness, the guy's been just decimated by injuries over the last couple of seasons, like multiple back injuries we're talking about. And for what it's worth, I am with the comments made by 49ers safety Jimmy Ward, who has respect for him, but at the same time, like, what did he ever really do in Detroit? Is that really going to make LA that much better? And while Goff, I think, as described by either Steve Rabel or Dave Wyman on the call of a game, I mean, when he slides, he looks like he's falling down a flight of stairs. I mean, the guy did somehow gut through a playoff game and help the Rams win that one. And I didn't think he was terrible, completely terrible, at least, against the Packers. So I wonder, because Goff, I think, like Garoppolo, is an easy target. While I don't think that Goff is, like, good, I don't think he's also, like, just an abomination at quarterback. I feel like he's in that, oh, you're overpaid, and because you're overpaid, we judge you a lot differently now.
So I think Stu and I are the anomalies in the sense that we talk about American football but don't get paid to do it, because it feels like every other person on the planet gets paid to talk about American football. And so I'm going to use that privilege of not being paid to talk about the sport. Can I sort of, like, just say that I don't have much of an opinion on Matt Stafford?
Absolutely.
And
honestly,
I try and avoid the Detroit Lions games like the plague because there's something about that uniform color versus the grass color.
Oh, you don't like the Honolulu blue? I love it.
Not against that grass color. There's just something that's really jarring to me. So apart from that early Thanksgiving game, which they continue to see as tradition, I tend not to spend too much of my time watching Detroit do their thing. So, I mean, I think he's a natural upgrade because I called Jared Goff as one of the worst quarterbacks of all time, pretty much from the minute he stepped into the thing. And we've got hours and hours of tape to prove it. And so even on the Super Bowl run, I was still very much like, yeah, but it's still in spite of. So thank God he didn't win one, so I wouldn't have to backtrack at all. But I kind of feel like Matt Stafford will do a really good job in a terrific coach's system. And that's what worries me more than necessarily the individualistic brilliance of the guy. I feel that they've brought a guy in who can execute the plan better than the old guy did. And that concerns me more than necessarily it being Matthew Stafford, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that. Training camp kicks off next week, so this is going to be the last one that we go around on. We talked about the guys that we maybe think the Seahawks have the highest expectations for and the ones that we have the highest expectations for, maybe what in reality, what they'll actually be able to bring to the table. Who do you guys think? Check that. Who are you guys going to be paying the most attention to and perhaps falling for the most trophy headlines about? Because that's generally what we're going to get over the next couple of weeks. This guy, he looks like something else, I tell you. Play some Jeopardy.
He's not going to get tropes, but he's someone who anyone listens to me and Adam rabbit on. He's one of the undrafted guys, and I just want him to make the team because I have contacts with his old college team. It's the Frenchman, Pierre-Olivier Lesage. He's posting gym Instagrams and all the sort. He's not in Venice. I think he lives back in Montreal, it looks like. But he's someone I really want to see just claim that center spot or maybe just back up next year because honestly, if anyone hasn't seen it, go on YouTube, is Montreal stuff. I know it's Canadian college football, but
okay,
it's so much fun to watch. But for tropes, it's probably the tight ends like Everett and Disley. Colby Parkinson kind of feels like Paul Richardson did for a few years. Like he's going to be talked up in July and August, and then you're gonna see him in Washington in 2-3 years. I love Paul Richardson, but he was for a couple of years. He was just talked about constantly for however long, 20 days, however long camp ends, and then Doug Baldwin. Then everyone remembered Doug Baldwin was not a figment of people's imagination. He was actually a Seahawk. But yeah, I think the tight ends, Disley and Parkinson in particular, I think are going to be the ones which are just held up. Held up like Simba in the Lion King.
Hakuna Matata.
Well, my sports fandom always manifests itself in nerves and therefore negativity, which again I think is something that separates us from our American brothers. But for the first time in the Russell Wilson era, I think that there are legitimate holes in inverted commas on the defense that you could say that because they're unknown, we don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think you could ever have said that linebacker and cornerback was a potential position of worry. Now, there are bodies that fill the holes currently, so I guess they're not holes because there are things that fill them. But ultimately, we have no idea the quality. It could be, as we say over here, square peg in a round hole, unfortunately, in a couple of those positions. And, we're going to watch a team without KJ Wright and without, a dreadlocked left cornerback for the first time in a long time that we trust hugely. And it's going to be weird, right?
Yeah.
But also, I do feel like, yes, those positions, they will say, well, they're not positions of need anymore, but they could very easily turn into positions of need when the Tennessee Titans roll into town in week 2. And that could be a bit of a reckoning. I hope it's not, but again, that's the way my sports fandom turns itself. So I would say that from a trope perspective, how legends or greats of the team in certain positions on defense are being filled by new guys, which is what you have to do to keep relevant, to stay good. I think that's going to be something that's very interesting.
Jamal Adams too, his absence, Bobby Wagner, is he still the guy that he's been? And I've got some questions about that. Not to say that he's been bad, but I think that's an interesting one too. And, you know, I don't want to make it all about Shane Waldron. We're going to be hearing a whole lot about Shane Waldron. And Stu, I like where you're going with the tight ends too, because Gerald Everett, it seems like one where a lot of people might try to talk him into something he's not. I think that there's going to be a lot of conversation about cornerback. And I feel like now that we're going to have a full off season to build up to the start of the regular season, first off, I think there's going to be a lot of great stories about DJ Reed. And this is a guy who, if you don't know DJ Reed, I mean, he's got a fascinating backstory and also seems to be one of the most pugnacious defensive backs considering his size that I've seen in quite some time, and you can't help but root for him. And I feel like we're going to get a lot of stories about him. And I think he's good, but I don't know how good, because last year at the end of the season, the taste that defense was getting every single week was a overdone Kyler Murray or the ghost of Jared Goff without a thumb, or it was Colt McCoy or Dwayne Haskins not getting punched in the face by a significant other and losing a tooth, but just punching himself in the face by making some of the dumb mistakes that he makes. So I like DJ Reed a lot. I want him to succeed. And I think that people are going to talk themselves into believing that he will this coming season. And I just guess I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen, because I think they're going to be going up against better quarterbacks this season. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him to have the kind of success that he did. And it was really fun to watch him last year, but he's a smaller guy. And I do wonder if maybe this defense that has always for such a long period of time had the taller guy as its calling card, if they are really, truly ready to go away from that entirely.
I think the biggest thing against DJ Reed is how it sounds like they went semi-aggressive to try and keep Shaquille Griffin. Like, I think Mike Dugas said that they were like second behind the Jags keeping him. So that is kind of like a negative, if I'm probably being a bit harsh, but they tried to keep the guy because they weren't sure what was one, coming in the draft, and two, what else is out there, but obviously three, what they had in the room when he jetted back off to South Florida. So, but yeah, DJ Reed was good. He was fun. He was, but I think I agree. I think he's still got like some wiggle room to show. He's got wiggle room to prove things, I think.
Yeah.
I also think there's literally zero leeway on Russell Wilson anymore. He had enough credit in the bank last year to skate through a very unimpressive second half of the season, and fans and media to probably correctly find excuses for him. I think after his antics, and I do think they're antics, and people can bury their head in the sand all they want, I think he was taking the piss for a lot of the first couple of months, and he had a message to send, and he sent it loud and clear. But as a result, I don't think it's unfair that as fans, we take a hell of a lot of that credit that we had in the bank for him and just move it into a deposit account and see where we go. I mean, I personally think this is going to be Russell Wilson's last season in Seattle. I know it's big. I know it's a big shout. And I do think that we'll end up getting a hell of a lot less in the trade for him in 12 months' time than we were offered from Chicago this year. And I know this is all, quite deep stuff for now 10 past 11 our time, but I'm happy to get into it. But yeah, like I just feel like this is the last dance unless they win big. And so I think Wilson's Seattle legacy is probably going to rest on this season.
I think that's a very good way to end this one. And it's dark and it's gloomy, and it's typically like whether it's Seattle weather or English weather, we're all in the same boat together, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure.
Our pleasure as well. I mean, Paul, I think, well, I'm sure Stu can carry on, but obviously you joined us on our pod earlier in the off season. We had, you joined us in a line of absolute banner guests on probably I think, is it a Seahawk lifestyle podcast we have, Stu? It's probably a lot more about that. We love the stories and, tales. We had KJ Wright and Doug Baldwin and Lofa the Super One in this summer.
So you guys have had some really awesome guests on the podcast, and the Doug Baldwin interview was awesome stuff. Seriously, we had a lot to dig into after that. We all know what's going on, and obviously, hopefully, looking forward to more of it, guys. And so, if you haven't subscribed to the Pedestrian Podcast already, make sure that you do. Follow Stu, follow Adam on Twitter at Stu_Court, at Adam D Nathan, the one, only, and official Seahawks lifestyle podcast.
I think it is. For
UKers out there. You got to check.
You'll hear us being like starstruck talking to these people, and the first three questions we have to kind of blow the cobwebs off and forget that. Oh my God, that's KJ Wright on the other end of the Zoom, or that's Paul Gallant on the other end of the Zoom. Hey, there you go.
Come on, there's no comparison between me and KJ Wright.
Yeah. Our first question to Doug Baldwin was about Pop-Tarts, so that's the level that we.
And it only got less NFL based from there for an hour and a half. So 100%.
Yeah.
Blueberry Pop-Tarts, number one.
He puts was it grease, fry grease on them when he was a kid?
Oh.
He puts butter on them and then
butter on them,
17 seconds in the microwave.
Yeah, there's a tweet about it. That's why.
That's very specific. I would ask about that too. That sounds like borderline sociopathic behavior. And on that note, that's going to wrap up this edition of Getting to Know Seahawks Twitter. Stu, Adam, thank you so much, guys.
Our pleasure.
Cheers, Paul.